be solving questions, or you can say discussing important topics around communication. So communication is the topic, and specifically communication ke andar we'll be talking about types of communication models. So the model or the process of communication, that is one of the most important topic, is asked in a number of manner in our exam. They can directly ask you the types of communication, they can also types of models, they can also ask you one model and the detailed analysis about that. So we'll be discussing the communication models in this class today. Okay, so when you talk about the process of communication, what it looks like, we all know there is a sender, there is a receiver, and a transmission of the message happens. The sender and the receiver ke beech mein you always see the transmission of the message through a medium, and you have this very important theorist of communication who has said that it is medium that is the message only. So it is Marshall McLuhan who said that medium is as important as the message. If the medium is not right, then the message is not going to be delivered in a proper manner. So the message that you have to deliver starts from the sender, and it is the sender's role to do encoding. The packaging of the messages is called as encoding. The message that should be relevant, because what is communication? That comes from a Latin word communis, which means to make things common, right? So you have to make things common and then you transmit it. A message is decided and it is encoded using a given medium. So if you are talking to your boss, you will be using formal mediums or formal chains of communication. While if you're talking to your friend, you can use a channel that is informal as well. फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर खेलने जाना है बाहर तो क्या अपने दोस्त को ईमेल लिखोगे, या अगर छुट्टी लेनी है तो क्या बॉस को सीधा फ़ोन करते हो? नहीं ना. If you want to talk to your boss, you will be writing an email, while if you are talking to your friends, you can do a telephonic conversation. So this is how the correct selection of medium is also very very important. Mass media में हम YouTube का preference कर लेते हैं, but classroom के अंदर हम लोग 101 ज़्यादा prefer करते हैं. So mediums definitely changes. Then decoding, that is the interpretation of the message, is done by the receiver. Receiver then will become the sender. Now this is the circular nature of communication. So we say that communication is a circular model, circular in nature. Why? Because the sender then becomes the receiver and the receiver becomes the sender. Here the receiver will then give the message or a feedback to the sender again. Message is there. The sender, you can say here the receiver who becomes the sender will encode, given medium would be used again, and then decoding is now done by the sender who becomes the receiver. So this is how communication process happens, but it is never complete without the presence of noise, entrophies, eruptions. These are the barriers that are there in communication. So there are always various kinds of barriers that will be there. You can never eliminate them, but you can reduce them. There are multiple types of barriers. You have semantic barriers, that is related to your language. That is why semantic barriers are also called as language barriers, जिसमें सबसे important है jargons, use of excess technical words. You can have physical barriers, physiological barriers, psychic, then you have psychological barriers, personal barriers, cultural barriers. These are all the various kinds of barriers that can be there. There are different models to communication. A model is a systematic representation of an object or an event in, you can say, an idealized abstract form. Models are somewhat subjective by their nature as well. The act of abstracting eliminates certain details, focusing on essential factors. However, the key of the usefulness of the model is point-to-point correspondence that they show. So model एक तरीके का replica होता है. There are three kinds of models. Broadly, there are three kinds of models. We have the linear model to communication, we have the transactional model to communication, and the interactive model of communication. Now, the linear model, as the word also says, it is linear in nature. मतलब वो क्या होगा, एक तरीके की straight line है, linear in nature है. You have the sender, you have the receiver, but there is no feedback here. There is no feedback. It is only one way. इसलिए इस तरीके के मॉडल को हम one way communication भी कहते हैं. We have the sender, we have the receiver. But you always look at the effect that is created on the receiver. So sender effect जरूर देखता है. This model was first introduced by Aristotle. We also have in total, three types of linear communication models that are important from the examination point of view. We have Lasswell's model, Aristotle's model, and Berlow's SMCR model. SMCR model. SMCR का full form क्या है? You have the sender, message, you have the channel, and then you have the receiver. This was also a PYQ that was asked in the exam. So ये linear क्यों है? Because यहाँ पे किसी भी तरीके का feedback नहीं है. क्या नहीं है? Feedback नहीं है. एक straight line में communication चल रहा है. Then you have the interactive model. Interactive model एक ऐसा model है जहाँ पे you have the sender and you have the receiver, and these people are talking to one another and there is availability of feedback. So there is message and there is feedback. So sender जो पहले sender था बाद में receiver भी बनता है और receiver बाद में sender भी बनता है. So there is what? There is role reversal. Then you'll say अगर मैम यहाँ पे भी रोल रिवर्सल है तो फिर ट्रांजैक्शनल क्या हुआ? ट्रांजैक्शनल मॉडल क्लासरूम में भी यूज होता है. ये मॉडल कैसा होता है? जहाँ पे हर चीज थोड़ी रैपिड होती है. द इंटरचेंजिंग दैट हैपेंस बिटवीन दीज पीपल इज वेरी रैपिड. Okay, that's very, very rapid. That is why it is called as transactional model. You have Berlin's as well as Shannon and Weaver's model, that is a transactional model of communication. Sachram and White's model is an interactive model. Though they will never ask कि ये model कौन सा है, but you should know at least the types of model. So linear model is always in a given line. Learn like this. Interactive model में role reversal हो रहा है. Transactional model में जल्दी जल्दी messages exchange हो रहे हैं. That's the difference between these three models. So there are three categories. You have the linear model, that is a one-way model, interactive model, that is a two-way model, and transactional model where two-way conversations within the message becomes more complex and events are discussed, propagandas are discussed. So there are a lot of layers to one type of communication. Look at the differences between them. ठीक है, अगर ये नहीं है visible तो थोड़ा छोटा कर देते हैं. या ओके, सो नेचर ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन ये वन वे है, ये टू वे है, एंड ट्रांजैक्शनल कम्युनिकेशन कंटिन्यूस है, बहुत जल्दी जल्दी चेंज होता है. फीडबैक, देयर इज नो फीडबैक इन लीनियर मॉडल, देयर इज नो फीडबैक. देयर इज फीडबैक बट इट इज स्लोली एक्सचेंज एंड फीडबैक कंटिन्यूसली एक्सचेंज होता है. सो इमेजिन दैट यू आर टॉकिंग on a phone with your friend. That's a transactional communication. But if you are normally talking to the given person, so आपको एक एक कर कर आंसर मिलेगा. या फिर अगर आप किसी से one to one conversation करो, जैसे टीचर और स्टूडेंट, okay, then you have role of participants. So sender only sends the message to the receiver. Here sender receiver both are useful, and here simultaneously they are talking. So this becomes unidirectional, this is bidirectional, this is multidirectional. Minimal emphasis is given on context. Here knowledge is important and it is multidimensional, so a lot of layers are there. This is simple and straightforward. This becomes dynamic. ये बहुत dynamic है because दोनों ही parties important है. But here you can call it as complex. इसे आप complex and multifaceted, multi complexity इसके साथ देखते हो. Complexities के level पर this is the most easiest and the simplest one. While this is dynamic, this is complex. Right? For example, अगर आपको announcement करनी है, that's only a linear type of communication. You're giving an announcement से आपके एग्जामिनेशन पोर्टल पे आपका डेट शीट आ गई है, तो वो क्या है, एक तरीके का सिर्फ वन वे कम्युनिकेशन है. देन अगर आप किसी से मीटिंग कर रहे हो, कॉन्वर्सेशन कर रहे हो, कस्टमर सर्विस से बात कर रहे हो, तो आपने अपनी प्रॉब्लम बताई, उन्होंने आपको आंसर बैक किया, दैट इज इंटरैक्शन. बट अगर आप किसी से नेगोशिएशंस कर रहे हो, रियल टाइम फीडबैक्स ले रहे हो, कोलैबोरेटेड प्रोजेक्ट्स कर रहे हो, जैसे क्लासरूम में आप बात करते हो टीचर से 101, दैट इज ट्रांजैक्शनल कम्युनिकेशन. सो यू नीड टू नो द डिफरेंस between the three. Let us discuss the important models. Now all the important models would be discussed. The first one is the Aristotelian model, which is the oldest model as well, Aristotle also talked about communication as an art of persuasion. How communication is different than persuasion, you should also know that. Aristotle said that the effect on the audience is very important. Feedback से भी कई गुना ज़्यादा important होता है वो. So Aristotle's model was the first. It was the earliest model, and basic persuasive communication के बारे में वो बात करते हैं. His explanation includes 3 communication elements. He talks about the speaker who speaks, the subject on which the speech is written, there is an occasion on which the audience is going to hear, listen to that speech, and finally a effect is created. And this effect will make the speaker understand that is it positive or is it negative. Okay, meaningful communication happens when there is a positive effect. So the person who speaks, the speech that he or she produces, and the person who listens, these are the 3 things, the speaker, subject and the audience, that are important according to Aristotle. From Aristotle's opinion, say for example there is an MLA जो अपनी election से पहले एक आपको speech दे रहे हैं. So वहाँ पे जब आप nodding of your heads दिखेगा उनको, तो उनको लगेगा कि अच्छा मैंने अच्छी speech दी है. People are convinced. So this occasion, the speaker, the audience, the effect that is created, this is important, and this is what communication is all about. An effect that is created, whether it is positive or negative. This is what Aristotle said. This is the oldest model to communication as well. Then we have Lasswell's model of communication. So Lasswell put forth one of the most basic communication model जो कि social scientific background में आया था. कब? 1948 में. This model includes the sequence, namely who says. सबसे पहले हम देखते हैं किसने बात करी. Who is saying, who speaks, that is the communicator. What, आप क्या बता रहे हो, that's who says what, that means आपका message क्या है, बात क्या करनी है आपको आपके बीच में. To whom आप किससे बात कर रहे हो, under what circumstances, and what effect is created. These are few things, these are 6 things that he talked about. This model provides explanation for linear one-way communication. This model also gives importance to the communicator and his message, but like in Aristotle's model, the element of feedback is not included, hence you know that it is a one-way linear model. However, this model had helped improving the understanding about communication among social scientists that are engaged in communication theories. This model was useful for political communication, propaganda, as well as political symbolism as well. Okay, so what do you think about? You think who is talking, who says, through which channel, that is the medium, to whom, who is the recipient or the receiver, and finally with what effect, what is the effect that is created. You look at these, you look at the communicator, message, medium, recipient and effect. These things become important, and then only communication would happen. But this is linear only because feedback के बारे में बात नहीं की थी, and without feedback communication is never complete, communication is never ever effective as well. So communication, feedback, feed forward, 2 things that are also asked in the exam, so ये भी पता होना चाहिए. Then you have Sachram's model. So Sachram ने बहुत ही interesting चीज एक introduce की थी, that was the field of experience, which is the PYQ. They have already asked this. So as per Sachram model of communication that came out in 1964, there is a source who encodes a signal and there is a recipient. So there is a source, that means there is a sender जो कि encoding करेगा, मतलब packaging करेगा आपके message की. सिग्नल या मैसेज आपका एक डिकोडर के पास जाएंगे, वो इंटरप्रेट करेंगे. डेस्टिनेशन मतलब रिसीवर तक आपका कम्युनिकेशन पहुंचना चाहिए. बट वॉट एवर द सोर्स एंड द डेस्टिनेशन इज, यू विल ओनली अंडरस्टैंड दीज थिंग्स व्हेन द फील्ड ऑफ एक्सपीरियंस इज कॉमन. Okay, the sender and the receiver must be tuned together. Maximum output from communication can be achieved when there is a common field of experience. For example, you came here to study communication and I am talking about communication. This means that our field of experience is becoming same. We are talking about the same thing. There is something we are talking that is common amongst us. That is why we are here. We can communicate with one another. So field of experiences का common होना बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है. The role of field of experience in 𝐃𝐸𝐬𝐬𝐻𝐿's communication model, as per this model, both an encoder and decoder receive and transmit the message. The person will decode the message, interpret it, and this is how wisdom and messages share. So, communication becomes a continuous process. A mechanical transmission of message can only happen when there is a common field of experience. Otherwise, entrophies would be there and communication effective nahi hoga. Then there are certain merits for this model. कुछ अच्छी बातें हैं. क्या है वो? फील्ड ऑफ एक्सपीरियंस के बारे में सबसे पहले इन्होंने बात की थी. सचराम प्रोवाइडेड द एडिशनल नोशन ऑफ फील्ड ऑफ एक्सपीरियंस which refers to the type of orientation or attitudes. The sender and the receiver can only talk when there is something common. फीडबैक के बारे में भी थोड़ी बातें होनी स्टार्ट हुई थी इस टाइम पे. कम्युनिकेशन एक रेसिप्रोकल टू वे कम्युनिकेशन है. धीरे धीरे हमें ये समझ आने लगा वेयर फीडबैक इज इंपॉर्टेंट, वेदर इट इज अ डिलेड फीडबैक, बट फीडबैक इज ऑलवेज पॉजिटिव. Then context becomes important. A message may be different, and the meaning of the message will also shift according to the context where you are talking. That is why communication is arbitrary as well. Culture is also important. The message may have different meanings associated or depending upon the different culture. Limitation is that Sachram's model is, while it lies between linear, still it accounts for the bilateral parties, and complexities and multiple levels of communication are also explained in this model. Then we have Shannon and Weaver's model. Shannon and Weaver का model. So Shannon and Weaver का model हमें कब मिलता है? 1949 के अंदर. It provides the visual mode of communication system in which electronic media became popular. So it is a mathematical model of communication. ये बहुत famous हुआ था इस नाम से, which is the mathematical model of communication. This model includes what? A communication source which provides the desired message out of a set of possible messages, written or spoken, pictures or music, anything can be there. A transmitter is there which changes the message, a channel which carries the message, a receiver who transmits the message, and there is a destination, that is the final consumer of the message. The three-level problems in the communication of information indicated in this model are technical, semantic and influential. In this model, he talked about the three problems that you can encounter while you are talking with another person. There can be technical problems, okay. The problems that are related to transferring of the message are called as the technical problems. Okay, for example, say signals नहीं आ रहे थे इसलिए आप phone पे बात ही नहीं कर पाए. That's the technical problem. Semantic, the problems that are related to interpretation of the message. Say I said a word that I said a chemical name of a salt or an ingredient that is needed for your body, and you were not able to understand कि ये कौन सा vitamin या कौन सा ingredient है. Only the chemist वाले भैया can understand it. That is the semantic barrier that would be there. Influential, problems that are concerned with the success with which the meaning is conveyed. Subsequent desired behavior is also affected by it. So the sender, the encoder, the channel, the decoder, receiver, all become important for Shannon and Weaver. Then there are some important concepts that Shannon and Weaver also talked about. What are these concepts? He talked about this word entropy, which has been asked in the exam also. सबसे पहले तो information के बारे में बात की. तो what is information? It is freedom of choice. You select what you want to say. That is your freedom. You give information that is something useful to the other person. Entropy. The communication can be measured by entropy, that is one's degree of freedom of choice to talk about it. If you have freedom, if you have correct ways of talking, you can give the information. But if you are not able to give the information correctly, there will be some disruptions, entrophies in between. Okay, like relative entrophies. Then there is a very important word called as redundancy that was also introduced in this model. In the class, we have discussed them in greater detail, but YouTube पे हम concepts discuss कर रहे हैं, तो थोड़ा सा हम लोग इनको brief में करेंगे. So redundancy is the amount of information that can be eliminated or added in the noiseless channel so that the message will still be meaningful. Then channel capacity, what all information can be transferred, what is the capacity of the channel. For example, if you are using Twitter, तो सिर्फ 21 icons ही लिख सकते हो, आप उसके अंदर 50 words 50 sentences नहीं लिख पाओगे. That is what, that is channel capacity. कौन कितनी ज़्यादा आपको बात करने के लिए हेल्प भी कर रहा है. यहीं से ही कोल्ड मीडिया और हॉट मीडिया भी आपको ज़्यादा समझ आएगा. ओके. Then what is noise? Noise is a disruption, distortion that can happen at any level or at any element of the message that you have. Then you have coding process. Whenever we produce or receive the message, we use codes. Efficient codes are used so that the statistical characteristics of the message do not change and you understand it properly. Then comes Barlow's model. Then we have Barlow's model. So Barlow का जो model है, that model is called as SMCR model also. इस model को हम क्या बोलते हैं? SMCR model. There is one more thing that we should talk. Here, when we talk about gatekeeping, redundancy, there is one more concept that is gatekeeping. ये भी पता होना चाहिए. What is gatekeeping? Do you know what is gatekeeping? So gatekeeping is जब specially जब आप mass communication के लिए बात करते हो, so you do not transmit whatever complete knowledge. You make something, so you stop something from being communicated. That is gatekeeping. This is also important and a term that is again and again repeated. Gatekeeping. Gatekeeping is not giving correct or not giving full information and keeping some information for yourself. That is gatekeeping. So terms like redundancy, channel capacity, noise, coding process and gatekeeping are important. Then comes the last model to be discussed today, that is Barlow's model. Barlow's model is also called as SMCR model. S, that is source, message, that is M से denote होता है, C channel, R for receiver. So here you will find the source and the receiver have same set of communication skills, attitudes, knowledge, social system and culture. When these things align, then only they have something in common and they can talk to one another. Finally, there is a message that is given with elements, that is the content, and with structure, that is the code that is created, and the channel is selected. It can be seeing, hearing, touching, smelling and tasting, and the message is transferred. So Barlow's SMCR model is a model where you give the sender and the receiver can talk to one another when the same set of skills are there. I hope this is clear. Now I'll give you 1 minute on each slide. You can look at all the slides and if you have anything to ask, you can ask your questions related to the given models that we have discussed. These are the models of communication. So Aristotle, Lasswell, Shannon and Weaver, Barlow's. Let us move to the next slide. You have Lasswell's model here. Let us move forward. You have Sachram's model and also remember that there was this person called as Osgood. एक पर्सन थे ऑसगुड और सबसे पहले वो ऑसगुड ही थे जिन्होंने कहा था कि कम्युनिकेशन सर्कुलर इन नेचर होता है. फिर उसके बाद ऑसगुड एंड सचराम ने एक साथ मिलके भी मॉडल बनाया था. दैट इज व्हाई दिस मॉडल इज समटाइम्स आल्सो कॉल्ड एज ऑसगुड सचराम मॉडल. सो दिस वाज द एडवांटेज. फील्ड ऑफ एक्सपीरियंस के बारे में सब इन्होंने बात की. इट इज अ डायनेमिक मॉडल. How situations change, how communication happens when you see the field of experience that is same. So Osgood, Sachram's model. You can also draw the picture that is given to you. Then let us move forward. These are the merits and the limitations of Sachram's model of communication. Okay, then we have Shannon and Weaver's model of communication. Here we have the source. The source is going to transmit the message. You have this proper signal. The receiving of the signal happens. The receiver will decode the message, and then finally the destination is achieved. And there are 3-level problems that are discussed with this model, that is the technical, the semantic and the influential. Okay, let's move to the important concepts that Shannon and Weaver talked about, entropy being the most important one. Write down about these. Okay, then let us move to the next page. Write down about redundancy, gatekeeping, channel capacity, noise, then coding process. Channel capacity, coding process. Okay, then you have Berlow's SMCR model, which is the easiest one. There is one more model that I would add here. This model is called as, this was asked in the exam as well, it is called as the Newcomb's model. The Newcomb's model of communication. This is also a basic model of communication. It was talked by Theodore. It is Theodore M. Newcomb, who talked about this model, and he is the pioneer who talked about the social psychology and the difference between the, so he is talking about sociology and psychology and how a new model can be created, and he talked about the triangle shaped model. So he talked about the triangle shaped model. In this model, the communication among individual happens when the context is there. So there is a topic, there will always be a given topic, then there will be the message that is created by the receiver, and finally there is message that is there with the sender. Okay, and both of them talk amongst one another. So here this model says, this is a working model which says that X, that is the matter about which you are talking, is always present. The two main advantages is that it focuses a lot on message. Message is very important, and also context is very important for communication. This is what Newcomb talked about. Right? So I hope all these models were clear and सबको समझ भी आया. So these are the different models that we have, and questions are also asked around these models only. They can ask you about which model, so they can ask you what is the full form of SMCR model, which they have already asked. So if they ask you SMCR की full form क्या है, it is source, message, channel and receiver. This is how they can ask you things. Is it clear? Any doubts? I hope not. ठीक है. So we can wind up the class with this. This is a page that you need to learn. So you have the three models, the linear communication model, the transactional model, as well as the interactive model. The interactive model, Sachram's model and White's model. Transactional model में you have Burdens and Shannon and Weaver model, and linear model you have Lasswell, Aristotle and Berlow's model. You also should read, and this is your homework as well, I have created short around this as well. You have the difference between feedback as well as feed forward. Okay. Now it is more important to give feed forward rather than feedback, which is more positive. Feed forward is more positive. Feedback क्या होता है? काम होने के बाद जो आपको बताया जाता है, that is feedback. While I.A. Richards have talked about this very important concept of feed forward. जब आप कोई काम आपने दिया है, उससे पहले ही यहाँ पर ही क्या करते हो? Information दे देते हो. यहीं पर ही सारी इंफॉर्मेशन देते हो ताकि ये जो पर्सन है ये सही से काम करे. सो द पर्सन फील्स वैलिडेटेड, द पर्सन फील्स हैप्पी, देयर आर लिमिटेड एरर्स दैट विल हैपन. दैट इज व्हाई दिस इज वे मोर पॉजिटिव, एंड अ पर्सन विल थिंक दैट अ पर्सन हैज अ प्रिजुडाइज. थोड़ा सा बुरा भी लग सकता है अगर आप फीडबैक देते हो, थोड़ा क्रिटिकल भी लग सकता है. तो विच इज बेटर, फीड फॉरवर्ड इज वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एंड इट इज बेटर देन feedback. So these things you will also understand. Digital convergence, then theories of mass communication, as well as now, so also there is this homework I would give you. Try to read about all the important movies that are there, old movies और उनकी dates. This time this question was also asked. So take this as your homework. थोड़ी जो मूवीज हैं आपकी इम्पॉर्टेंट, जैसे फर्स्ट मूवी कौन सी थी, फर्स्ट साइलेंट मूवी, फर्स्ट मूवी विद वॉइस, विद सिनेमेटोग्राफी, इन सब की आपको डेट्स और मूवीज के नेम पता होने चाहिए, बिकॉज दे हैव आस्क्ड दिस बिफोर. ओके, so these are few things that are important. With this I can wind up the class. Thank you, have a wonderful day. This concept is repeated so many times. I want you guys to be thorough with this. And I'll see you in the next class. Bye bye. If you have any suggestions, you can tell me that in the comment section and we'll discuss those things here. Bye bye and enjoy. Have a wonderful day.